Today, I'm honored to share space with Aiua Wild. Aiua was on the show most recently about 6 months ago to help me unpack my darkness retreat that I went on. So today, she's coming back on to check back in with me after about 6 months post-darkness retreat, post-big work, wanting to check in to see how the journey's been going. But we'll also take this time to talk about some of the pitfalls or perceived pitfalls, perceived backsliding, perceived missteps that we might have on our journeys. There's some times where we feel like we've gotten past a certain thing, a story, and a situation, and maybe some months later, some time later, we find ourselves maybe reverting back into those. And so we talked today about, what some of those ideas might mean when we think we're backsliding, and ways that we could potentially, see that as some growth opportunities, see that in different lights. So today we talk a lot about ways to recognize when you're in those spaces, but also more so ways to get out of those spaces. This is a very beautiful conversation. I love having Aiua on. She has a great way of reframing what I say and put it back to me in a way that I could understand the tone in which I'm actually talking to myself. And I think we need people like that in our lives. So I really hope you get something out of this conversation. We'll see you on the other side. Journey of the Modern Soul is a listener-supported podcast. Ways that you can support me in this show that would make me very happy are by sharing an episode with somebody that you think it would impact, by liking or subscribing to the show on whichever platform that you're listening on, or by making a financial contribution. Any donations, if you're called to it, can be made to my Venmo account at Adam-Riehl, ADAM-RIEHL. Links will be in the show notes. Thank you. All right, welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by my dear friend and constant guest on the show. You've been such an inspiration for me and such a pivotal, I don't know. You've been so pivotal in the growth of my business. The growth of my person as a human being. Right? You've held a lot of good space for me. You've opened up your space for me. So, Aiua, thanks for coming back. You're the shit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You make me cry.
Yeah. Well, I don't, as I started to talk to you, it's like, after we've been talking for a half an hour or so, it's like, I don't, sometimes we forget to tell people how much of an impact they've had. Right. And you've been a part of my life for a number of years now. Right. And I think ancillarily, kind of we dipped in and out here and there at the studios and, met you there. And then, definitely our paths kept coming back to one another. But there's people in my life that have just been there, right? They've held the space and they've pushed me a little bit when I needed to be pushed, helped me when I needed to be held, challenged, all that stuff. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been I know when we had our first podcast together, I told you I've been dreaming about this for a long time, but I think the love between the two of us is so easy.
Yeah.
That kind of support, and obviously having you out at the center is just, it's so beautiful. And I love that the people keep showing up. And the other day, Rachel messaged me and just was like, what a beautiful experience, right? And now we're talking about okay, how are we going to get Silks into the yurt so that we can start doing some floating sound baths? And but yeah, there's definitely a kindred connection.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. The last time you were on, it was about 6 months ago, maybe just a little bit over 6 months ago. We had unpacked my darkness retreat as a main topic idea, and so you helped me hold that space and talk about the impact that the darkness retreat had on me and my journey, and so the idea was to come back and let's check in on that. But there's also so much that comes with that, after the integration of some big work like that, whether it's your meditation, your medicine, your yoga practice, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities for integration that I think we miss on. We always, we'll tend to remember the big ones, right? I'm going to journal after this fucking, yoga retreat, or I'm going to go and meditate after this experience, right?
Right.
But this conversation, there's something I can integrate after this, right? The yoga practice, all that stuff. So, and, as we integrate from our big work, there's that champion feeling of man, I did some shit and I feel good and I've made some movements and I got some things that I'm figuring out. And so you ride that high for a little while. And it's like, yeah, fucking things make sense, man. This is great.
Right.
And then
Who rides the high?
I try to.
Yeah. No, I'm listening, and of course I have this huge grin on my face because it's like it's so easy to relate to.
Yeah.
Like the ego comes in so swiftly.
Mm-hmm. You just champion yourself, self high fiving,
Which is great.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
totally.
live it.
And I think that's the trap. It's like once you realize that you've been sheltering your emotions and you choose to lean into them and start to explore them, right? And a lot of times it's because we want to feel more of the good emotions, right? Because we're maybe sad or depressed or anxious or whatever, right? And so we start feeling those really big emotive moments, right? Where happiness is there, you cry because you see a baby and all that fun shit that, like puppies and Bambi and, smells and all that stuff. But there's also like, you're going to feel the quote unquote negative feels too a little bit stronger. The sadness, the apathy, just like, not to say we live there, but you're going to feel those, right? And it's not like you can escape one to live in the other. And I think that's where some of that misconception comes in. And it's funny because I keep going back to this Ram Dass quote that I remember I heard a decade ago or so. The story about him, and it's like when he became Ram Dass, he thought he could just be the pious, holy, fun guy. I'm going to tell you all the anecdotal stories, and everything's going to be an allegory, and we're all going to fucking learn and be happy together. And then he'd get off stage and like throw his water bottle at his assistant and be like, "This is too cold, and I need a towel for my throat because I've been talking, all this stardom shit."
Yeah.
But it's like you got to embrace the spectrum of the human emotions. You can't just live in that or in this. Just as much as we don't want to just live in the negative emotions, think about having an orgasm for 5 minutes. That sounds maybe kind of like, oh yeah, I could maybe experience that. But after maybe 47 seconds, maybe cresting over a minute and your toes are still curled and your eyes are in the back of the head and you can't like know your name anymore and you're still going. It's like, that's got to stop sooner or later too, right? I got to be a fucking human being again. So it's like, it is finding that balance, and the balance is taking the understanding of the work that you can have the opportunity to do, as well as the pat on your back for the work that you feel like you've done.
Yeah. Yeah. What I hear is a desire and like a promo for balance. And I think that that's a really important aspect. And for me, like I just came out of Joy Camp, which why I've waited this many years in my life to participate in something that was solely dedicated to like playing and joy, I don't know. I just signed up for Joy Camp 2.0.
Right.
Hit me up if you want the link because it's still not publicized yet, and I think there's only 15 spots left.
Well, tell us what Joy Camp was.
Joy Camp is led by this person, Jacques, and I literally signed up a day and a half before it started because I had a friend who was supposed to go and she ended up not being able to go, and she posted it online and says, "Does anybody want my ticket?" And I was like, immediately my heart was like, yes. So I show up and I actually know nothing about this person. Turns out he's kind of like somebody who's gone viral on social media.
Okay.
He does sober raves and like all these really fun, like wild, exciting events. He takes people on like rave hikes and things like that.
Interesting.
He really encourages people to have fun. And like he does talks. I know he's got a bunch of stuff coming up. Anyway, not a promo for him necessarily, but great guy. Follow him online. I think his Instagram handle is The Party Scientist.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And he's young, like, and I would say a majority of the people. So I show up in the woods. We're doing this thing off grid in just north of Squamish before Whistler in BC. And I show up to the woods by myself with 50 strangers. No phones, no drugs, no alcohol was kind of like the punchline.
Yep.
But there was also no running water, no electricity. We're on a lake. It was honestly so beautiful. What was wild was it rained almost torrential downpours off and on for like 75% of the time that we were there. And everybody was still really deeply dedicated to like joy and connection. And so anyway, long ramble about the description. When I came out of it, like you said, it was like the colors were brighter. Like I was just noticing the beauty. It was bringing so much tears to my eyes. And he had us do an exercise before we left talking about what is something that you're going to grieve leaving here.
Oh, wow.
And then there was this amazing woman, Bear, who actually lives here. She's in Federal Way. Love her.
All right.
I don't know how to plug her other than reach out to me and I can connect you.
Yeah.
But she's a death doula.
Oh, that's
And she's now just finished, I think, a 2-year training with medicine. So she's also doing medicine work. A woman doing medicine work, which I'm very excited to connect
There needs
with.
to be more of that.
So she did a session at the end of camp on death. And so one of the exercises, I've done a lot of ceremonies, even with death and that as the subject. But one of the things that she did with us that was definitely one of the highlights of the weekend for me, which is funny because I'm talking about Joy Camp and now I'm talking about death, which she talked about. So instead of it being called a funeral, she called it a funeral.
Oh, that's amazing.
But we wrote a letter to our last breath.
That's such a cool thing.
And it was like so incredibly profound. I happened to be ovulating while I was at camp, and so it was very sensual for me. I talked about the beauty of the blessing to all wishes and the comfort for all boo-boos. Like the way that I was able to write to my last breath was just so meaningful to me. So anyway, he asked us what are we potentially grieving as we leave here? And everybody had something different but very similar. And I knew for me, I almost always go out of a retreat or a healing experience with that euphoric state. And as I've learned over the years through practice to be very, very mindful of the moment that I slip into separation/abandonment.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, which is a great segue because I want to come back and be really focused on your integration. But to say that, there's always going to be peaks and valleys, right? The way that we live our lives is reflective of the heartbeat. And I don't think that trying to move away from that is really good for us. I think that there's really an opportunity to find acceptance and grace, but also celebration of those high moments and those low moments. Right. And the only reason why I can stand here and confidently say that today is because I have a huge fucking community that will hold me in both of those places.
Yeah.
And not only do we live in a society that is addicted to everybody's newfound awareness of trauma, we saturate ourselves in that, right? I think we've talked about this before. Look at all of the hospitals and the prisons and the mental health institutions that are full and all of the diseases that are skyrocketing.
Right. Look at all the popular media we consume before bed. Whether it's scrolling or on TV. I don't know how many friends that this is going to date me, but similar kind of ideas. But how many of my friends or people watch something like Law and Order SVU or some fucking NCIS or some crazy fucking rapey fucking cop drama domestic violence kind of shit before it says okay now let's go to bed. I'm tired.
Yeah,
and it's like why am I not sleeping good?
And to that,
what the fuck, man.
The opposition of that I find more challenging is actually finding people to hold you in the high moments, to celebrate with you, to cheer you on, to say, I'm so excited that you have that going on in your life, or that's amazing. Like how uncomfortable we are to celebrate ourselves.
Right.
And that was what I felt really nourished by in this environment at Joy Camp was we gave space for people to not be in joy, but it was this, okay, and why are we here, right? And so there were things that I felt really good about where I was and my ability to move through that weekend with presence and grace and be able to process things that felt off for me.
Yeah.
But not everybody was. And he wrote a blog and called himself out on some of the things that he could do differently next time. Because this was, I didn't know this, but this was his first time doing this.
Okay.
And so there are people that aren't in a space where they can handle that much joy and that much excitement without it actually perpetuating the darkness that they've been in or been struggling with. Like it almost highlights and emphasizes the division that they are experiencing within themselves.
Yeah.
And that speaks to the nervous system, right? Like if you're in dorsal and people are trying to get really excited, it's just going to be more paralyzing.
Yeah.
And so that was apparent for, some people there, and there was love that was offered and support.
Yeah.
But
there's an author, David Brooks, and I'm spacing on some of the books that he's written, but he's a fantastic author, real good research, good, just topical kind of, what do I call it? Analytical books. Right?
Content.
And he was on Modern Wisdom the other day, and I was listening to his episode, and they were talking about one of the things in humanity that we want the most, that we desire the most, that we all like search and just want to have, is to be seen and to be understood as we are. Also, the most terrifying thing that you could ever possibly think that could ever happen to you is to be fully seen and heard and understood.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a thing that we desire so much. Please, somebody just fucking understand me and see me for who I am and what I'm going through. But at the same time, when you're going through it, it's like, please, nobody look at me.
Yeah.
Just leave me alone. Like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. And it's so to the point you made earlier about, the joy that you found at this camp, this joy camp. Is it so when we do have those, until we can find a way to manage maybe our ups and downs, right? I experience the crashes after the elation of the work that we do, right? And I'm trying to pad myself and understand, like build the understanding, and that there's going to be a dip, and and we can support ourselves, and it's part of the process, and yada yada yada. But as sad as I am going into a lot of these works, and in the states of mind, especially in the beginning, years ago when I just first vipassanas and first deep meditations, medicine work, stuff like that, there was a like, this is the last chance. This has to work, right? Mm-hmm. And it did, and so, but then I can't say that it stopped, right? But we have these dips, so. Is the mentality, right? Is it so bad that we're falling, quote unquote, backsliding, or moving into a thought pattern, or a behavior pattern that we're trying to move away from? And is it bad for us to quote unquote backslide back into that, or how much can we just live in the fact that you found the happiness? You can. Mm-hmm. Right? The backsliding is what you've been doing. This is what you've been experiencing, is this negative emotion. You never thought you could be happy. You never thought you could be fine, joy, you could be balanced, whatever. And then you find it through whatever modality you do. And then we beat ourselves up for backsliding back down. But it's like, you found it.
Yeah.
So how can we do more things, or pad yourselves in different ways and create more support system to go back to the places where you find this stuff, and not live in the place where we know that we're going to fall back into? Because that's, until we really do a lot of work, that's our default mode, is that state of mind. And we're working to get out of that state of mind.
Right.
So it's not like flip a switch, all of a sudden, boom, hey, there you go. Live in that world now, right?
Yeah.
And would I really want to? Again, like the orgasm comment earlier. It's like, part of the beauty of seeing, like, a child and like a little new baby, and smelling that little new baby's head, and new baby smell and all that fun stuff.
Toes.
Yeah, their little toes and their little chubby thighs and shit. It's because I've had so many shitty fucking days that it's like, man, this is simple and beautiful and amazing, and I can really just appreciate the feeling I get from just simply just beholding this infant.
Well, and it brings us to the immediate presence.
Right.
Where we can recognize that there is nothing wrong. I think that when we look at all of the practices and all of these exercises and all of these strategies, that's really what we're trying to do, right? And, you know, the infamous quote, be here now.
Right.
Like, if I can be here now, then that's where I do find peace, which gives me this space for happiness, for joy, for celebration. But I want to touch on, I want to hear, what does backsliding actually mean to you? Because I want to question and maybe talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's been more so in the past couple, I'd say maybe past like 6 weeks to couple months that I've felt really, felt like I've been really hard on myself, you know? So backsliding for me, it's really kind of funny because when I finally noticed the real story that was in my head, and I'm just going to preface this by saying, like, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, which is a phrase I heard recently that I just fucking love now. And I'm not trying to like, and I'll be as explanatory in this statement as I can, but I'm not trying to dismiss anybody's journey, right? And this is part of this is part of me, my journey, right? And I'm not trying to say like, let me do me, screw you, but like, this is a big part of my journey that I've got to get past, because this is me. This is 100% me, right? This is nobody but me, right? And so what I've noticed myself is the mentality that got me to finally, let's say, go to a yoga class, put the bottle down, you know, all that shit, like all the negativity that led to finally me saying, like, this is enough, like, this is enough, right? I can't fucking live like this. It's came back, right? The internal shit talking to myself, the internal shit talking and mocking of others. And again, I don't mean any offense. And if you know me and you're around me, please trust me. I'm not like pointing out, like, this is all this internal, like, just shit we got to dig through, right?
You don't need a disclaimer.
You know, it is so funny because I know I don't, but sometimes it's like, you know, that traumatized child in me is like, but please don't, just love me even though I'm telling my truth, you know?
Yeah. I see you.
Yeah. But it kind of started in, I've always had an issue with me accepting me, right? I've had weight issues my entire life. I'm the middle child, so put whatever psychological, you know, thing around that. Dad was gone a lot, even though he's part of the family. We're latchkey kids. Mom was full-time job. Dad was truck driver, you know. So there's like a lot of like stuff to unpack and shit like that, you know. And I can, you know, think back and think that I had like this perfect childhood and this perfect life, but honestly, you know, nobody really did. I mean, nobody diddled me. I didn't have any sexual traumas as a kid. I didn't have any beatings or anything like that. You know, Dad was a little stern, you know, but still, like, I didn't, like, nobody, like, close hand punched me, right? I got a belt every once in a while, but I grew up in the fucking 80s, right? And, but, you know, there was this thing that, like, I really could never be myself. I could never be good enough to be myself, right? I always had to placate to somebody else, right?
Right.
And so I see a lot of that stuff, like, really slamming back into me right now. And I think there's part of it is like there's an awareness there that we talked about, you know, that awareness of like, what the fuck are you thinking like that for? Like that self debilitating, like, you're better than this, you can't think like that anymore, like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, shame.
Yeah, 100% shame. You know, and you know, a lot of it comes from my fear and current struggle with finding and just like understanding that I do have an authentic self that might be different than what I'm presenting. And whether that's more outgoing, more embracing of the talents that I'm afraid of, more like, I'm a 44-year-old man that is in the best shape I've ever been in my entire life, and I'm still afraid to take my shirt off because of the fat child that I grew up as. You know, like shit like that, right? And so, but where I started like, and that's been inside 40 some odd years, right? Get it, right?
Yeah.
And it's stuff I manage. But what really kind of scared me about this thing, and it took me a while to understand, I'm still trying to, is the outward projection of it. Right? Like, I would see my friends that I've known and love and that are in this journey and that are doing their things, and I would start to just look at them and be like, how are you presenting yourself right now? Like, what are you, just like, oh, the dragon energy today is so strong, and I'm feeling it, the eclipse and the this and the that and the things and the fairies and the things. I'm like, oh my God, it was just so fucking overwhelming. And again, like, I'm not saying you're not being authentic, because, like, do you? I don't even know, like, the internal workings of you, so please. But I was feeling just like eye rolling in the back of my head, like third house and fucking star charts and shit. And I'm like, and it was just so triggering. And it reminded me back when I was just like an ignorant teenager, young 20s, where I would just turn a blind eye, ignorant, just like, get out of here with that fucking, astrological, crazy fucking, metaphysical shit. Right.
Right.
And I was finding myself just being super charged, like, in negative ways by these people that are very loving and intimate in my life. And it was just like, you're better than that. You're better than that. And then the other narrative was like, who the fuck is, Michael? No, your name is Michael. You're not Starfeather, like, right. Michael, come back to me, But at the same time, the other side of my brain is like, Starfeather, be fucking Starfeather. Yeah. So it's just that internal monologue and that internal fight got so fucking strong that, I mean, my breaking point finally was the dog that I had to rehome. Yeah. And it finally gave me an opportunity to cry and to be emotive and to realize that I wasn't allowing myself to cry. Yeah. And it's like, as much work as we do, we can still really, 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 really hide in our trauma responses and our paddings, because, to be fair, I've been doing that much longer than I've been doing this. Yeah. I've only been on this path since I was maybe 32 and I'm 44. So let's give me like 10 years of decent work. So that's 32 years of really fucking hiding from my shit and building up walls and, what I would consider security methods. Right.
Yeah, so one, I just want to say, fucking normal.
Right. Thank you.
Like, there's nothing wrong with you or this process. Naturally, I want to take you into a process and hold space, and so let's chat about that after today. Because I've gone through that. Mm-hmm. And I probably will again. And I think that there's a beautiful place where we can come to see and understand ourselves, which is what I hear you talking about, right? It's easy for us as providers to do that for others, and then sometimes take a teeny bit of that and reflect it inward and be like, oh yes, I can love myself today, right? It's still this, let me earn my worth.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And, Sadie Simone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was watching a live yesterday with him and Marianne Williamson talking about her new book. And I was only on for a little bit because I was also getting ready to make dinner. And he talked about, he's a clergyman now, or I don't know if that's the right term. He is somebody who works within the hospital system that sits with people as they're going through like sickness and death. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so they will call him in to help offer support to the person that's either sick and dying or to the family. And he brought up an opportunity where the mother of the woman who was dying says, do you think that because you're doing this that you're going to get into heaven? Mm. And so he brought this to Marianne to be able to talk about, because part of her book is, I think, talking about Christ consciousness and, rewriting the narrative away from religion, basically. That's my interpretation. I think, I don't remember the book's name, but I want to say it's something like The New Mystic Jesus or something.
Love that.
So he shares in that moment how he was triggered. Like, who is and triggered because, you know, he's Buddhist now, but he grew up Catholic. And here's this woman that's basically trying to qualify him when all he is there to do is to love on her daughter and to like be of support.
Yeah.
And what I love that Marianne pointed out was, isn't it silly that we begin to judge those who are judging us? Right? And that is the hypocrisy that we're trying to call out in those spaces of religion. But that is also reflected in how we do that to ourselves when we are coming through the wake of a healing space, right? So we go into these, like, you know, for you, it was this darkness retreat where you went in there because you knew you had some shit to work on.
Yeah.
And then you came out of it and we talked, I think it was about a month after.
Oh, yeah, just about.
And talking about, you know, what did you learn from it and where are you at right now with your integration? And then we said, yes, let's revisit this in some time. And I think in that moment, it's like intellectually we knew, because in 6 months' time, you are going to feel very different. Mm-hmm. And so for me, in listening about the reflection of the inner critic, I think you and I are both very similar. I think most people that are in a healing, service-oriented practice we have a very high bar that we hold for ourselves. Being latchkey kids, but also just living in a culture where what we perceive online and what is shared is this ideal perfection. Right?
Yeah.
Very rarely do you see people sharing the shit. And then for those that do share the shit, people shit on them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're just doing this for attention, or, right? Like, I remember when Aubrey Marcus, somebody was close to him that had passed away, and he shared a video crying. Mm. And people were like, look at him making this up. And I'm like, dude, I do that.
Right.
I have a lot of people that praise me for doing it, but it's because I'm a woman.
Exactly.
Right? And so when I hear you sharing the inner critic and the judgment of yourself, and then being externally, right? You were worried and concerned about the inner judgment, but you weren't as worried about that as you were for when you started projecting it outwardly.
Yeah.
And those are so textbook for a lot of us. Like, it's only a problem once it starts harming others.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's fine when it's just me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I forget, I think it was my second sponsor who was pretty much my primary sponsor for a majority of my AA days. Mm-hmm. She said, I want you to imagine if your best friend spoke to you the way that you speak to yourself, whether or not you would still be friends.
Right.
And that was a, like, oof, duh. Like, okay. But I also want to, like, give space for what's underneath and behind those things, right? Let's go back to the phrase that you said, how are you presenting yourself? Mm-hmm. Of course, if you analyze that from a negative mind frame, it's like, wow, that's a dick thing to say. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a genuine question of, how are you presenting yourself? I know that the way that I like to be taught and reflected back to is pretty masculine. And it's because I grew up with my dad and my brother mostly, right? My mom, I visited on weekends in summer. So my way of communicating is more traditionally very penetrative, very direct. I've learned over the years how to be more feminine, and I can be, especially in the healing spaces. If you meet me on the street, that's not the woman you're going to find, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And for years, I fought that. And now I'm like, you know what? I like who I am. I like that I can be a straight shooter. I also love that in certain spaces, I can be the most feminine, most nurturing, surrendered, soft space for somebody to land. So if I were in a position and somebody said to me, hey, what's going on? right? Today when I got ready, I was like, ooh, I get to put my fancy pants on and my little shirt. And I was even going to put eyeliner on and I couldn't find it because that's how often I wear it. But it was because I was wanting to be mindful of how I presented myself as I'm going to be out and about today, with both with you. And then I have a couple meetings online today. And then I'm going to my son's curriculum night.
Yeah.
I want people to know when they see me that I care about myself.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that there is a narrative that I also perceive. And so this was something, actually funny enough, one of my clients brought this back to me from Diedrich at the Choose Again Center in Costa Rica, which anybody who knows me, I've been affiliated with for a long time. I was sharing with her one day a reflection where I felt like I was being judgmental, which is what I hear you sharing in that reflection for yourself.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, but Diedrich says to me, there's a difference between a judgment and an observation. And I think the difference when I unpack that for me is whether or not there's a negative emotion or a fear-based assumption in that observation.
Okay.
I can observe there's as soon as I start to have the thought, I have this person that's kind of like on the periphery of my world. I think like you and I were for a period of time where they float in similar circles. And they have a persona that they have embodied that is fairly new over the last 3 or 4 years. Whereas when I met them, I could see tiny sparklings or like sprinklings of that persona in that person. And now it's become very inflated. When I first saw this person in this new variation of this character that they are displaying, I was incredibly judgmental. And I want to tell you all about it. And I just bit my own tongue to not, because that's my ego getting involved. Right. When I do my process and I look at like, what is this judgment? Because it's really my own judgment about myself that I'm projecting onto another.
Yeah.
What I can see inside of me is, oh, wow, I took it back real quick. The fear of doing something for attention. Because growing up in my home, anytime I was mad, sad, angry, or acting out, I was accused of doing it for attention.
Wow.
So I can see that I have a belief that there's something wrong with me. And so if I act on that belief, I will do what I need to perform to get the world to know that there's nothing wrong with me. So I won't wear the feather earring, or I won't wear the silver alien outfit, or I won't wear the headband, or I won't speak up when I need to, right? There's all the ways that I can like shrink back and hold back.
Right.
And I've dabbled in both arenas. I've given myself space. I've gone through different characters, different personas at different stages of my life to be at a place where I am now, where I wear whatever the fuck I want to.
Right.
And I speak up when I feel like it's worth it. I don't speak up when I think it's needed by something or someone else.
Yeah.
And so, I share those reflections because I think that there is an opportunity and a space for you to love the thing that's motivating you to observe and maybe, yes, judge this other person in the moment, but to take the time to reflect back on like, where is that coming from for me? But more, I don't want to say more importantly, equally as important is to look at the judgment and the shame and the criticism that comes in as that second arrow, right? The first one is enough.
Yeah.
But then that second one that says, oh, fuck, I know better. I'm better than this. I shouldn't be doing this. Look, I just went through this crazy experience where I loved the world and I did all this work and now here I am, right? The backslide for me is not a backslide at all.
Right.
This is Jai Ganesha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here is this lesson that's presenting itself again for me to actually flex that muscle that I just deeply exercised to come through it with more grace and ease and maybe not stay there as long as I did last time.
Yeah. That's the part where I'm trying to really wrap my head around. I had a friend that went through rehab detox, and while they were detoxing, DTs and throwing up and all that fun stuff, the person that was with me was like, you've been on this medicine for, X amount of years, expect more than a couple days to feel better. Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a couple of years, as long as you've been on the medicine, but it's not just to flip the switch because you're now doing something different, And I think that we got to give ourselves that time to like understand that. And this is the counter narrative in my head. Like fucking cut people some slack, Adam. It's all good, right? Because there is that. I can hear that voice. It's not as loud, right? But I can hear it, and it's good that it's there. But like the Michael Starfeather example, which is totally hypothetical. I don't know a guy named Michael that moved to Starfeather, right? I know a Michael and I know a Starfeather, but they're not related, right? If Michael had been forced to be Michael and not be able to explore what truly Michael wants to be, is sexually, personally, faith-wise, whatever. And then all of a sudden Michael finally gets an opportunity to take a look at himself and to say, you know what? I'm going to wear some leather boots today. I'm going to wear an ascot. I'm going to shave half my head off, right? Fucking let's start this. Let's figure
Paint
this
my
out.
nails.
Right? Yeah, right. Let's do this shit, right? And then so then you see Michael and you're like, "Oh shit. All right, Michael. Yay, do you fucking Michael, right?" And then maybe a month later you see Michael again, and now Michael's whole head is shaved and he goes by Mike. And maybe he's wearing high heels instead of leather boots, right? And to like your point, like we're trying on these character masks, right? Because we don't fucking know. We've been forced into this box that nobody wants to be in for so long. And so when we start to kick those doors open in our box and start to cut out little breathing holes, right? Those holes might start off in one shape, and then the next time you see them, that shape might be different because the breathing hole is allowed to get bigger, and they're experimenting a little bit more with their openings, right? And so it's like be part of the fucking process, right? And like I heard actually Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I fucking love. I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he was talking about transgenderism, which I never thought I'd hear him talk about it because it's not astrophysicists, right? It's not astrophysics. But he said, and it was so fucking cool, I think maybe because I wasn't expecting it to come from him, but he was like, maybe today I wake up and I feel, he's okay, so hormonally, energetic-wise, right? Like we're half and half, right?
Right.
We're 50% masculine, 50% feminine. And let's say today I wake up and I feel 55% feminine and 45% masculine. So maybe I want to wear a little skirt today. Cool. All right. Throw on a skirt and walk out and do my shit. Next day, wake up and I feel, maybe 65% masculine, 35% feminine. So I'm going to wear like a leather vest and some fucking like spiked boots, right? Because I feel a little more like hardcore today, right?
Right.
What's wrong with that?
Right.
And it's like, man, so to that point you made, like we got to try these hats on when we've been shoved in these boxes for so long. And so like, how can we be supportive of the Michaels in our lives as they go through their changes towards whatever they're moving towards, right?
Yeah.
And in turn, if this is this is my takeaway from all of this, as much as I'm mentally beating up Michael in my head, it's me.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's just me.
This is you externalizing the internal process. And so many of us do that.
Yep.
And it's I remember, I don't know how long I'd been working with the process that I utilize today for myself and what I teach. But I tell people in the beginning of learning these practices, notice whether or not you internally process and then live it outwardly, or you externally process and embody it internally. Because not all of us operate similarly, right? And I love that you brought up the transgender subject because I started thinking about that moments before you brought it up. I was at an event last week. I identify as queer, poly, And I was laying in a cuddle puddle with 3 other bodies that I traditionally would have called women. And one of them, we've known each other in this space for quite a while, and I really enjoy spending time with. And the other 2 bodies were new to me. And so I was like, we were talking about something, and I was like, yeah. And I was like, this person is my twerk sister. Like, we can just get down. And it, we started laughing. And then they spoke up and they said, hey, not a sister. I relate as they, them. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you for reminding me. And she's like, yeah, no big, or they were like, no big deal. And we have talked about the beauty and the grace of making those mistakes,
right,
and people saying something and not in a guiltful or shameful way. And then the other person laying next to me spoke up and says, yeah, I actually relate to as she, they, and then talked about how they were getting ready to have their breasts removed because they had breast cancer before. And there was more to that story. But we were talking about my curiosities of like, and I said to the person that refers to themselves, I shouldn't even say refer, who identifies as they, them, because it's not a reference. It's right. They identify as they, them. I said, hey, there's a group of us that are putting together a retreat at my space soon for women. I said, I know that you just shared that you identify as they, them. Is that something that you would ever be open to? And they said, at this time, no, it doesn't resonate for me. But in the future, feel free to ask me again.
Wow.
And I was just really grateful to be able to have that conversation. And not too long ago, I was in another conversation with a trans woman that I work fairly closely with. And she has been such an amazing teacher for me. And we actually talked about, she educated me on asect. These are terms that are familiar in the territory that I work in, but right. I don't always remember them in the moment. And she was telling me that actually scientifically, they've been able to prove that we're not like chromosomally, is that a word? Chromosomal? I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah,
chromosomally.
Yeah.
We're not always 50-50, and we're not always the gender in which our genitals identify. And so when people speak to feeling conflicted, like for me, I was, as they were talking, I was like, fuck, I think I identify as asect. I know I appear to most people incredibly feminine. You ask any lesbian who meets me, I'm a lipstick, which is crazy because I almost never wear lipstick. When I was with my ex-girlfriend, she presents very masculine, but intimately speaking, she was very feminine, and I was more masculine. And so, there's the idea that we are half masculine, half feminine. And then there's the mystical presentation, right? Or the energetic presentation. And then there's the biology and the science behind all of it.
Right.
And I think that for me, what really resonates for me has nothing to do with science.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with the box, right? Because even in your share around feeling the percentage of femininity or masculinity, you still chose choices that are box related, right? High heels are related to women. Totally. Leather vests are related to men that are bikers, which, hello, or female bears. Bikers, right? Yeah. True. Which is funny because I'm like, I don't see him in a leather vest. I see it as like a felt. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Yogi can wear whatever type of vest or skirt he wants.
There you go. But
we still are still conditioned, just like the bunny and the baby and the pain relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so to come back to the conversation of your darkness experience and the integration process and this concept of backsliding, I want to talk about Adam. And who is Adam? And how does he feel about who he is today? And what expression feels most authentic to you? And maybe even like, what are some feelings that you've had since coming out of the darkness retreat? Like, what are some reflections about the feelings that you've had, and then where are you currently?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I'm really moving through right now is just a lot of confliction, like self-confliction. I still make this joking comment from the movie Dogma, which I still love the movie Dogma. Kevin Smith, Jay and Silent Bob style. But and it's a take it or leave it. I like the movie, but there's a part in this movie, and I've talked about this a lot. So Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are also in the movie, and they play archangels. One's Michael, one's Gabriel, I think. And Ben Affleck's archangel character is trying to destroy the world, right? Destroy Earth. It's not worthy of God, and lost its way and stuff. Matt Damon's character is like, no, the humans are flawed, right? We'll figure it out. And Ben Affleck said something about on the lines of they've lost their beliefs, and Matt Damon says, well, that's the problem. People die over beliefs.
Yeah,
you can change an idea, right? So why don't we look at ideas instead of beliefs? Because new information comes in, can allow that idea to move in whatever way, shift and grow, whatever. And so I've tied myself. I love that, because especially in this world, there's very little understandings of a belief, right? Like I can prove to you my feelings of what I've experienced, my gnosis, more or less, right? And it's like, no, you can't really do that. But then you get to the point of where it's like, I don't need you to explain to me why you do the way you do. You feel it. I trust you. Do you, right? Now, for me, what I started to notice about myself is that I've regurgitated enough of these ideas that they've kind of become beliefs. And in that confusion of me unpacking and holding myself to a level that I'd never hold anybody else to, these ideas of beliefs started coming into my head. And then again, that the old Adam was just like, how do you believe in reincarnation? What is the thing that you're coming back to? Is reincarnation a good thing? I can't even begin to tell you the conspiracy bullshit that I went through in my head about the belief systems and stuff like that. But it basically took me on this path of like, you've fallen for it again. Before it was drinking and drugs, right? At least it was a little more blatant. But now you put a spiritual bow on it, cross your legs, meditation, do some plant medicine. You found you're just escaping again in your own way. And I'm like, no, I can't. How the fuck am I doing this again? Right. And it's like, following this idea, this path down, and it really kind of threw me into this loop of, like, I can't believe you believe in this. I can't believe that you think this is real. I can't believe, like, where's your proof? Where is this? And I'm like, I don't need it. And I just constant bickering in my own head about, my ego and my capital S. It's like, where's the proof? Don't need the proof. But you need proof. Don't need proof.
Right.
Feel the proof. Where's the fucking, and it's, and then again, that coupled with the, my being triggered by people's authenticities, like this, it all blew up. And I think what really, and I still struggle with this now, but the thing that I'm realizing is like, I've never really given myself the chance to ask big questions, like, why am I here? What are we here for? What's going on? And in a way, like, I don't want the answers.
Right.
Like, I don't expect the answers. But there's maybe part of me that's like, well, what the fuck have you never asked these before? And then there's part of me that's like, well, if you're never going to get the answer, then what the fuck is it worth for anyways?
Right.
It's like,
I mean, you're speaking to the cartoon angels that we all grew up watching.
Yep.
Right.
Bugs on one side, Daffy on the other. Fuck yeah, man.
It's just, and that within us, proof or otherwise, I believe that there's light and shadow that lives, right?
Right.
I'm on a hike with my son yesterday. And I don't remember what comment came up, It was part of a prayer. Oh, I know what it was. I got to tell the story, right? Because now it's like, it's good.
Yeah.
So I love mushrooms.
Okay.
And so when we go on hikes, I'm constantly stopping to like oogle and get into the energy of the mushrooms and take its picture. And I see this one mushroom and I was like, I want to touch it because there was little puddles on it.
Ooh.
And I couldn't tell if it was water or like sap.
Okay.
But I was worried that it was sap. And I was like, I don't want to touch it because then my fingers are going to be all sticky. So I grabbed a little tiny stick. And my son was like, yeah, I wanted to touch it too. And I was like, touch it. And he's like, no. And I was like, touch it. And I was like, so he's like, no, I'm not going to touch it. And I was like, fine. So I touched it with the little stick and it was water. And I was like, that's so cool. And I'll have to send you the picture so you can see it. So we're walking away and the verse in my head says, lead us not into temptation. And I thought, and I start laughing. I say it out loud and I start laughing. And I was like, God, how many years in my life that I lived by that idea? And I was like, why not? Like, if we are tempted, and again, morale here, right? And some of us have an awareness of what that is, and some of us don't because there's a lesson there that needs to be learned.
Yeah.
Why not give in to our temptations as long as we're not harming ourselves or someone else? That's my rule, right? Emily Nagoski, who says, never yuck anyone's yum. She also says, nothing is bad in the realms of sex and sexual expression and sexuality unless you're harming yourself or someone else.
Right.
Harm is debatable in some of these spaces, right? Like, anyway, we don't need to go down the rabbit hole. So I'm hiking with my son and I start thinking about that whole prayer. And I asked my son, do you believe in evil? And he says, yeah.
Okay.
And I said, all right. And we just kept on our hike. Part of our conversation that we had yesterday was, can we be curious with each other and have discussions without the motivation of changing each other's minds?
I love that. That's a hard one right now.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so I share that as a reflection of what you were just saying. Is like, one voice says, you don't have proof, and the other voice says, I don't need proof. Yes, they both can be true. Right?
Right, yeah.
And for me, this is something else my clients will hear me say. I reference a lot of books, one of them being A Course in Miracles, which for some people, they're like, that's absolute bullshit, right? What that book teaches. Cool, great. If that's what you need to believe for you to get through your day, I support that. For me, it's a huge ego check, and it's really important that I continue to do that in this lifetime. So I'll hold it in the air and I'll be like, this could be complete bullshit. It has no facts, no science behind it that says that this is true. But because I use it, it's made my life incredibly more enjoyable.
Right.
And incredibly more fulfilling in the things that I do believe are really important to me, which is connection, truth, love, presence, strength, and ultimately, what's really grounding for me is certainty.
Yeah.
I feel certain about the beliefs that I practice. When I am not certain is when I am not practicing them.
Yeah. Yeah, the beliefs part is, even though we just mentioned that, it's still hard for me. But I like the idea of living in the ideas, right? I think that's something I'm having to come to grips with myself. There's part of me that's like, you need to stake your claim, plant your flag or something like that. I'm like, I don't want to. That's not the way I want to play this game. I don't know enough to say. I love being the most ignorant person in the room.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. So why would I argue with you if I don't fucking know? Right.
Yeah.
It's like, but you made a point earlier, and I think this is what it really kind of comes back to me. Again, personal journey. And I see this with a lot of the clients that I work with and the people I conversate with. But, even though we've been given permission, right? And you said, like crying, you made the comment earlier about, I can't remember who you said was crying.
Aubrey Marcus.
Aubrey Marcus, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's, constant, masculine, male representing human beings that have cried openly in public, right? Mm-hmm. Most of them being celebrities of sorts. Michael Jordan a number of years ago, Tyrese a number of years ago, Kanye West before he went all batshit fucking crazy, in his own right. And now Aubrey Marcus, your example, and as much as, man, it feels good to see Michael Jordan cry, right? As a man. As much success as that man has had, I know his dad was taken from him at a young age, he's got his own shit he's going through because life is life, no matter how much money you have. Fucking, yeah, Michael Jordan, get red-eyed and cry.
Right.
And then you feel support, but then the next day you see memes coming out about how much of a bitch Michael Jordan is. Yep. Oh, yeah, cry, you little bitch. And then people coming out talking about, like, oh, fucking Michael Jordan crying and all this shit. And it's like, you can't open the door and then block it. What is that doing to us? But I think that what it really points the arrow to, and again, with the, we draw it back to the transgenderism and the ideas of different sexuality explorations now that are being accepted or encouraged even. Mm-hmm. Our boxes don't fucking make sense anymore.
There are no boxes.
Well, but the thing though is but that's the way our brain works. Yeah. Our biological brain works in patterns. Yes. And so because of that, it puts these things in boxes. Oh, you have a penis, you're a man. You have a vagina, you're a woman.
Right.
You have long hair, you're probably a woman.
Right.
You're wearing a bandana, maybe, I don't know, right?
Right.
But spaghetti string dress, you're going to be in the box in the woman category, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, like these permissions have been given, but we're still so fucking caught in these patterns of male, masculine, you iron fist. You don't cry. You make people cry.
Right.
You don't do the crying, right? Don't make me take my belt off,
right.
Fucking,
Give you something to cry about.
Give you something. How many times I've heard that?
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it, and so it's recognizing the patterns that you fall in, good or bad. Right. There's some good patterns that I have now that I love.
Which one? Yeah. Which ones you love?
Yeah.
I shave my legs, not because somebody told me to.
Right.
I quit for a long time.
Right.
I went through a real natural apple cider vinegar to wash my hair. I gave up deodorant. Mm-hmm. My kids still make comments all the time. Mom, I can smell you. Oh, you're welcome. Like, oh, I can tell I've not been eating well. There's reasons for it for me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I hear. The certainty that I share is not about certainty for everyone.
Right.
And one of my best friends, she's an incredible woman, deeply educated, holds one of the most amazing spaces with sound and compassion and coaching. She's Mama Moon, if you look her up online.
She sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I may have talked about her before in our space, but I think that there's reason to connect the two of you for sure.
Yeah.
She's in deep work right now. She's healing from an incredible surgery. Anyway, but she has been working through this program for several years now, and she talks about the Buddhist perspective in, I believe, psychology. She's doing a Buddhist-based psychology program. And in her teachings and what she has learned and shares is there's truth and then there's relativity. Mm. And in my work, there's truth and illusion. Same thing, different word.
Right.
Give it the meaning you want to, right? That we know that as human beings, we are meaning-making machines, hence the boxes, right?
Totally.
So what has helped me, especially in moments of transition and integration, is to revisit those places where I have found comfort and solace in chaos. And it is remembering the certainty of who I am in truth and relatively.
Right.
And so if I decide to, let's say, open up myself about the fact that I do different forms of sex work, And I feel really good about it in that moment because I've been practicing with people and I'm seeing the power of the healing and the beauty that it brings in love. And I am surrounded by other people who are also practicing it and feeling the impact of what it's doing for ourselves and the world. And I'm supported by teachers who've been doing this since the 70s. And then I get one fucking comment from somebody who's known me my entire life talking shit. And I shut down. It's because I'm not actually grounded in my truth. And I've become aware of the relativity of the way the world perceives this work instead of what I know to be true.
Right.
And what I know to be true is not what the world knows to be true. And that's okay. It's not my job to convince anybody else of anything.
Yeah.
And if you come to me with curiosity, know that it's not by mistake. Like,
that's, oh, man. There was a, I've talked about it on the show before, but, you know, we all have our pasts. We all have our futures, right? There's still some shit I'm going to fuck up in the future.
Yep.
Guaranteed. Right?
Thank God.
No matter how much I'm going to prepare myself for it. But, you know, one of the things that I did in the past, you know, I used to sell drugs.
Right.
Mainly weed, but, you know, sold pills, coke, you know, X, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But mainly weed, right? But there is, and by no means was I, like, big. I wasn't, like, fucking Sopranos. It was just, like, you know, I paid for my college, right? You know, shit like that. But there, how many times, like, I keep coming back to that, you know, and like, I don't think I've ever created the circumstances to lead to somebody's overdosing. But the fact that I distributed those medicines or those narcotics that could potentially lead to that,
right?
You know, like that. You know, like, oh, you can't know God.
Right.
You cause somebody to overdose. How can you know God? Right? How can you know this peace in life?
Right.
You know, and this, but I think this is where we really get into. You mentioned certainty. We're only in a place in this world that we know of, civilization that we know of, that we can record, that we can actually feel okay and feel safe being an individual. So much of our, you know, right or wrong or indifferent, this is where we're at in the world, right? So much of the way this world has been constructed has had to be group effort. We got to work together as a group so we can build these civilizations. Not, and again, I'm not saying civilization, the way that we're doing it, is the right way, but this is the way that we've been thinking, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at, like, even recent times as, like, post-World War II, you got a bunch of people coming back from World War II that are disenfranchised because the war they were just in, they don't fit into these boxes, they don't want to get a corporate job, they just blew somebody's head off, you know, for fucking months, right?
Yeah.
And so now you don't follow the group anymore, right? You don't have the short haircut, you don't have the clean look, you've got some tattoos now, right? You don't want to get a 9-to-5 job, so now you're a biker. Right? You hang out at these biker bars, right? And even though there are other bikers, the group of bikers is not as big as the group of the masses, right? And so that group is looked at as an individual. They're outcasts. They're pushed out. Mm-hmm. You don't follow the narrative that we follow, so you can't be a part of this group, right? You look different, you act different, you talk different, you're a little more violent, whatever, right? We're now at a place where we can finally be an individual, right? I can have tattoos and not be considered a biker or in the military or a fucking criminal.
You could get a job.
I can get a job with a face tattoo. You know, I know CEOs of companies that got face tattoos. Fucking Mike Tyson. You know, look at him, right? But we're just now getting to the point to where you can be a safe individual and have your own views and have your own business and have your own, like, ways to approach life and not be pushed to the outskirts of town because you're the weird person. Now you're the cat lady. You're a witch. Mm-hmm. You're a whatever, right? And so I think there's still, even though, again, even though we have permission to be an individual, even though we have permission to cry as men, even though we have permission to have short hair as women, not that we need any of those permissions. Right. They're now openly accepted to an extent. Yeah. It's still like...
Depends on where you live.
Exactly. Right. And it's still, but I think there's some of us that are brave enough to just throw it out there and be like, cool, this is me. Yeah. And then next week you see them, they're like, wow, this is different you, but hey, this is still me. Mm-hmm. Right? Good for you. So I think I say that to convince myself that, you know, like, it takes a while for this stuff to feel comfortable, if at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable in my own body. You know, like I said, the heaviest I was 280 pounds. I'm 160 now. I'm half the weight almost that I was. And I still feel like I can never feel comfortable in my own body, in my own skin.
Do you want to?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I think once you make a decision, that will really help.
Yeah.
Have you read the book Existential Kink?
No. I think it sounds familiar. I think you've mentioned it before, but I don't write that down.
Yeah. She essentially talks about how we are addicted to our suffering.
Oh God, fucking hell, yes.
And how we actually get off on it.
Yeah.
And that's the kink part, right? So what I know from a chemical level is that we can become addicted to the chemicals that are released in our bodies when we go through things that it triggers our guilt and our shame.
Yeah.
But I've also been really looking at what does it mean to make a fucking decision that I'm done feeling that way.
Yeah.
And there's been a few people that have talked about this recently that I've kind of tuned into and watched people's responses around it. One woman in particular was talking about getting sober. And, you know, that's such a huge topic in our world, right? And she basically said, I got sober when I made the decision that I was done, but I had to make the decision.
Yeah.
And she was basically saying, until you make the decision, it's never going to work. And I would argue to say, I don't know that that's completely true. I didn't want to get sober.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lose my family. And I was recently talking to my husband about that. I said, look, and I have a client who's been talking about it. She goes, I'm so sick of hearing the idea that I have to love myself first before I can love anyone else. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that that's real either. Because, well, then I would back up and say, well, what is love, right? But when I look at, this goes back to the comment I was making about, you know, do you internally process and then live it outwardly, or do you externally process it and then learn to embody it? If I make a decision that I'm done hating my body, I'm no longer going to do that. Naturally, you'll be presented with opportunities to practice that, right? And I think it's in Emily Nagoski's book.
Okay.
If it's not in her Come As You Are, I think it might be in the workbook. But she has a body-based practice. She has you look at yourself naked in the mirror every day. And the first practice is to not look for anything that's gone wrong, but everything that's perfect and right and beautiful. And, you know, you're talking about opportunities that we have now in our society that says we can be individuals and be relatively safe. Right? To be an individual in the past was not safe.
No, not at all.
And I would still say that that's true.
Yeah.
Like, if you become so individual, you know, how long may that last? And is that living? I don't know, right? That for me, I'm a communal being.
Yeah.
Right.
Humans are. We're communal.
Yep. And I'm very communal. Like, I need people to thrive.
Yeah.
I could survive without people for a long time, but I really need them to thrive. And so there is the time that we take to be individual, to reduce the influence, to get clear with ourselves. This is meditation, right? Whose thoughts am I thinking? Whose ideas am I really embodying? What beliefs have I adopted? And do I want to keep these things? Right? And so there's a shedding of the layers so that we can rebuild them in the way that we desire.
Yeah.
And, you know, today I showed up and I'm like, damn, Adam looks great. I love that your glasses match your sweater, right? Like in my mind, I was like, are those fashion glasses? Are those prescription? I don't know, but they look great. And it's like, I can appreciate how you chose to put yourself together today. And when I hear somebody questioning, who am I today, or who do I want to be moving forward, it inspires me to consider, when I get dressed, do the fabrics that I put on my body feel good?
Yeah.
Do I enjoy the visual inspiration or reflection that I see when I look in the mirror? How's my heart, right? Like, where am I emotionally? And not all of us have the privilege of time to fucking think about that, right? If you're a single parent and you're working 3 jobs, you're not fucking thinking about whether your socks seam is in the right place when you put your shoe on.
Yeah, you're lucky you got socks on in the first place.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to take for granted that these are, I want to say, spaces that are privileged, but also, for me, I choose to believe that this is part of my karma and my dharma. Like, it is my job to learn how to unpack these things and repack in the way that feels good for me, because I was assigned to be able to share that with the world and teach those who also want to learn how to take that time for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned something that it's just something I realized I was doing personally in a very comedic way, in a very proud way, for a long time, probably since teenage years, if not younger. Growing up in Texas, lower middle class, our parents, they both worked, they both had great jobs, but it was tough, right? We ended up like through the 90s, parents got better jobs, and we maybe just coasted in that middle class, but we're lower middle class for a while. And but the reason I say that is because like we the collective we lived so. Literally, we lived on the wrong side of the tracks, the other side of the tracks, I should say. But pretty much the whole lower middle class to middle class rankings in our area were on the the east side of the freeway. Right? West side of the freeway was the rich folks, it's Woodlands, right? So there's all these like big houses, teenagers driving Beamers and Mercedes and all this shit, right?
Now it's Teslas and Land Rovers and
exactly
Rivians.
Yep. And I can't tell you how many times, like, growing up, we would have as kids and as friends, oh, you think you got it bad? Oh, yeah? Well, this is, I woke up in a pile of pee-stained sheets.
Yeah.
Or, my mom got evicted and took all, like, we would have those, oh, you think you got it bad things. And, like, tout the negative experiences you have in life.
Oh, right? Yeah, that was my...
like I got holes in my jeans, I've not bought a new pair of shoes in 10 years, I've always get hand-me-downs, bullets, fucking life flight landed on my street last night and somebody got cracked in the back of the head with a tire iron, it's like nobody's talking about like, oh man, I got an A on my test yesterday. I feel so good. It's like, this is how bad I got it, motherfucker.
Which is to show the world how strong I am.
Exactly. And it's like, I still find myself in ways of doing that, but I look back and I look, and I'm, man, if anything, like, and I try not to beat myself up because they're past narratives. It's like, I found my old yearbooks when my mom passed, she kept everything. And I found my old yearbooks and I was looking in there and I'm like, I was a fucking angry child. There's so much in there about like, fuck you, your hair looks dumb, shit like that when I was like a preteen and stuff. I'm like, damn, man. Right. But like, as much as I'm like fucking ignorant kid shit, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I used to think like that.
Yeah.
Instead of like, man, good job for not thinking like that anymore, right? You are a human being that's older, that's got some wisdom, that's got some life experience. That that's not a true statement anymore.
Right.
But all I could think of was like 8-year-old me thought like that. Oh, I'm such a piece of shit.
Yeah.
It's like, God damn it. No, look how much you've grown, right?
Yeah.
So it's, like how much are we fighting for the negative things in our lives and in like owning that stuff, white knuckling the trials and tribulations and not seeing the potential good that can be there and owning that and being okay with that and not thinking that we're like championing ourselves and like going around like self-fiving ourselves, being like, I had trauma movement today. Like, I don't think I'm a piece of shit anymore. Oh, get off your fucking high horse, you fucking asshole. Like, go get a fucking job, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm just trying to get past my traumas, right?
Yeah.
Like, Monica, my former fiance, would always say, like, mainly regarding women, because she would always do it when somebody was being catty. But, you know, we definitely use that as a generic statement for all genders. Why don't we start to straighten people's crowns instead of knock them off? Mm-hmm. Can I straighten your crown for you instead of like, boop, knock that bitch off and be like, pick that fucker up if you can.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, hey, hey, you look good today, girl. Let me straighten that crown for you, man. And my earrings are popping, right? You know, whatever it is. But like,
yeah.
Man, it's just, and I know some of it's cultural, some of it's, you know, like I have some friends that are British in UK, and they take the piss out of each other all the time, right? They call it.
Yeah.
I'm not built like that anymore, right?
Yeah.
I grew up around brothers and boys, and, you know, we've always take shit, you know, like talk shit. I don't like that anymore, man. I get sensitive. Like, I'm like, man, I don't want to be around that. You know, I don't want to be around that. Oh, look at this fucking guy over here. Oh, look at that guy over there. Oh, you with your fucking fancy shoes. And like, I don't care if we're all going to hug it out at the end. I just don't want to be a part of that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's part of it too. It's like having two brothers that, like, my brother's probably going to listen to this episode, but I think it was probably like 5-6 years ago when I realized, I'm like, every time I'm around my older brother, he taps me in the dick. What the fuck is going on with this shit? I'm in my fucking 40s, man. Don't tap my dick anymore, man.
Yeah.
And it's just, but that's also like adolescent, you know, just growing up shit, you know. Maybe it's an awkward moment that makes it feel less awkward because now there's like a reminiscent of what we used to do when we were children.
Yeah.
You know, like things like that. But, you know, part of it still, it's like, can we get past nut slapping? Can we just get past that, please?
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah. It's funny because I've been having some of these conversations with my kids.
Okay.
And my daughter the other day was venting about something that I was doing and then something her brother was doing. And I said, can you be more specific so we can talk about it? She's like, it's fine. I'm fine. I understand. It's not a big deal. And I said, whether it is or it isn't, if you have feelings about it, I want us to be able to talk about it. And so one of the complaints that she was having is that when her friends are around, her little brother has taken this new tactic of, you know, like poking fun at her. Mm. And I said, hey, I totally understand that ruffles your feathers and that you don't like it. I think that if you have a conversation with your brother outside of the moment when you're angry or upset and tell him how much you don't like it and ask him to stop, he'll respect you. And he's doing what little brothers do when they're trying to connect with you and trying to relate. And so this is an opportunity for us to not demonize either person, not shut my daughter down. Because, you know, there is a voice in my head that's like, seriously? Oh my God, he's 12. Like, let him fucking talk shit. It's always awkward and clumsy and it never actually makes sense. And we've laughed, right? Like, we've been in the room and my son will say something to her and we'll just bust up laughing and he'll laugh too. And he's kind of awkward about it. And I'm like, dude, I get it. You're learning to talk shit. It's okay. It's a little bit awkward. You know, but it's like, I don't want my daughter to feel like her perspective isn't worthy of respecting, right? And so as a grown man, and then yesterday with my 21-year-old son, he has definitely adopted the pushing of the buttons and doing things to get a reaction. And I can really see that it does come from a place of like wanting to connect. And so yesterday he's laying in my lap and he wants me to rub his head but I'm trying to get work done. And I'm like, I can rub your head for a few minutes, but I really need to finish this. And he keeps keeping on like, come on, Mom, come on. And, you know, and I realized in that moment, I wasn't clear about my boundaries. I wasn't making a firm decision. And so what I did was I joined him in it. And so then I started poking him and kind of tickling him. And he's like, no, stop. So he's telling me to stop and I'm not listening. And I was like, what? You don't like it? What I'm doing to you? But I also know that in that moment, I'm perpetuating the same behavior, right? So in reflection later, I'm like, right? But on the same, like in that same breath, I can also acknowledge like, we're family, we're safe. I'm not hurting him. He's not hurting me. Like, can there be space for both? Right? If your brother's tapping your balls and it's physically painful and you're like, dude, don't do that anymore, right? Like, for real,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need you to stop.
Yeah.
And then he does it again, right? Then that's crossing a boundary. But if you're like, like we've taught my kids, if you're laughing and you are still engaging in the activity and you're telling somebody stop, the communication is not clear.
Yeah.
And this is really difficult in the world of consent. Yeah. Anyway, we got way off topic. I still keep wanting to talk about Adam. And I know that we can go on all of these threads and they're all connected.
Yeah.
I think that it's all relevant. And for me, this underlying theme of can we be okay with being human?
That's, I think, okay, so
As I choke.
it's so funny because that question in different ways have been popping up a lot. And there's part of me that says that, okay, so I learned a little factoid not too long ago that has found different ways to permeate my ways of thinking. Some maybe considered good, maybe some considered troublesome. But, and you know, people might know this. This is just not information that I had until maybe about a year ago. But I've heard the term mitochondria. Right? Never really knew what it was, but was listening to some folks talk, much smarter than me, and they were talking about mitochondria and how there's mitochondria in every single one of our trillions of cells that we have in our bodies, and they self-regulate based off of, like, there's a specific amount of mitochondria that need to be in each cell, and the mitochondria know that, and they self-regulate by bringing new ones in, taking old ones out, blah blah blah. Cool. All right. That's fun to know, right? So what do mitochondria do? Mitochondria, by them being the mitochondria bacteria that they are, the byproduct of their waste is our energy. And so by them doing what they do, they create energy within the cells, which give us energy as human beings to be the human beings and to move around and have these conversations and all this shit, right? Cool. Got it. The thing that really screwed me up was that we share 0 DNA commonality with any of the mitochondria in our bodies.
Wait, say that one more time.
We don't share any similar DNA, any relation at all to the things that make us survive in our bodies. It's in every single one of our cells. We just share 0 DNA commonality with all these mitochondria that populate all of us, that make us human beings, to give us energy to be, right? That's fucking weird to me, right? But it's also beautiful because that shows that it's not just me. Right? There's microscopic organisms all around our bodies, just like they're like the little sucker fish on the big whales in the fucking ocean, right? Pulling off bacteria,
Parasites.
pulling off dead skin flakes, all that shit, right? We need it, right? If we didn't, we'd just overflow in our own bacteria and our own viruses and shit, right? And so there's this symbiotic relationship that I can't do it on my own. Physically, like I biologically cannot do this on my own. Like I need this external thing within me, just like you need it within you and everybody else around this world. So it's not just me, you know, it's not, but it feels so alone and lonely sometimes. Right. So I think the thing that's really helped me kind of get an understanding of these narratives is that I can raw dog life. Let's put it like that. I could raw dog life, right? No medicines, no vitamins, no minerals. Obviously, you need food and water, right, to survive. But, you know, you can just fucking go at it, right? Just do fucking life, right? No support, no supplements, nothing, right? And that doesn't work for me, right? But at the same time, I know that, like, I'm a medicator. Like, I will medicate my life in ways that I can justify. So I need to find a balance with that. And so what I found is really helpful for me to integrate this understanding was to reestablish the connection to myself and to stop looking at myself as a separate being from myself. Right? There's a question that's been going around the old Instagram for a little while now that says, you know, well, first off, first question is, do you have an inner monologue? Because some people don't, which is astounding to me, right? Yeah, some people don't have an inner monologue.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have thoughts in their head where they say like, "Oh, I wish I would have done this," or "I should
I'm
probably."
already having a conversation in my head about why that can't be
I
accurate.
still don't believe the people that say that they don't.
I don't believe it
It's
either.
fucking crazy, right? So the fact that there is or isn't an inner monologue in your head, but the other question is if there is one, how do you refer to yourself? What referential pronoun do you use? I, me, we, us, you, right? And a lot of that can show you how you talk to yourself. You, oh, you hold yourself accountable a lot, right? You piece of shit. Oh, I can't believe you did that. You know, I shows ownership. Sometimes I isn't. Oh, I love myself. You know, you don't really say you love yourself. It's like, oh, I love myself. The we for me was something that planted itself in my head when I learned this little mitochondria idea. Because it's not me, right? There is a we. There's definitely a we. There's fucking, this isn't even part of me, right? This is an external thing that's in my body that makes me move, right? So it's definitely a we to me, right? And us and a we, you know, so, you know, like, how are you okay with you? Right. And are you okay with you? Are you able to ask those questions and to able to sit with some of those answers? And I think that's where a lot of this is now. It's like, how do I hold space for myself and support myself, right? And so the support that I found that's really helpful to get me out of my thought loops, my rituals that either are or aren't working for me is microdosing. And it's the medicine for me, and it's the way that I can find support for me that allows me to hear my own thoughts. I'm not, you know, I do macrodose on times, you know, but the microdose is like, it gives me enough of an opportunity to hear the other perspectives, not just the egoic screaming voice in my head. Like I can quiet that voice down and hear the capital S self like whisper to me and be like, you're okay. You're fine. You know? So I think it's you know, it's finding those things finding the voices you can trust, which might sound weird to people that don't have voices in their head, because I have lots. I don't get it. I have so many voices in my head that when I've met people that say they don't, I'm like, I want to follow you around. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know if I could prove this or not. Not that I want to disprove it to you. There's something about me that just needs to know that's even an option.
That it's even possible. Yeah.
So I think, you know, I do think that, again, you can find it, but honestly, with as communal beings as we are, you know, I'm not Walden. I'm not going to go fucking live in Alaska and homestead by myself and have two chairs in my house, one for me and one for a potential mystery guest, right? Right. I can go live in a goddamn cave in the Himalayas and not be triggered by the world, but is that really living, right? Right. You know, we're communal beings. There's inspiration that I take from people like, you know, the story of the Buddha, which, you know, Buddha, you know, found Nirvana and was like, hey, cool, know you're there. Got some work to do. You can even draw parallels to the, you know, Christ's resurrection. You know, Christ put himself up there or didn't put himself, but, you know, the cross, died, Romans killed him, and then he was like, hey, what's up, Dad? Gonna come kick it up here in the fucking Holy Kingdom. But guess what? There's a bunch of people down there that, like, probably need my help. So know you're here. Know I can get there. I'm going to come on back down, right? And it's that bodhisattva idea, right? And so I think there's modicums of that, you know, in the journey that I'm on right now is not saying I'm any of those things, right? But there's that idea that, like, what happens if you find it? Because you're looking. Are you gonna white knuckle that and just live there and be like, no, back to society. I'm turning my back on that motherfucker. I found my version of the Kalish Mountain, the fucking, you know, whatever it is, and I'm just gonna kick it here with Shiva.
That's been anytime I've gotten to the place that feels like the oneness, that's always my struggle. I don't want to come back. I'm like, I don't want to leave when I'm about to go in. Yeah. There's that fear. And for me, it's always related to my children. But then once I get there, I'm like, don't take me, don't make me go back. So I can't be Jesus. I can't be Bodhisattva. Like, those are not my, in this lifetime.
I'm already putting up walls and a foundation over here. Motherfucker, where you at?
But then what's interesting is immediately after I have that, I'm shown why. And then there's a very different feeling.
Right.
Like, yes, okay, I wholeheartedly understand and respect why I'm here. And now I'm learning to love that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why plant medicines work so well with me is because of my addictive nature. I not allowing, not whatever it is. I don't know the verbiage, but there's nothing that as lucrative for me and my personal journey is to find those spaces in the plant medicine journeys, and I look forward to having those opportunities to be there. When I get there, I'm ready to come back. Right. I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to see what I need to see and then come back. Like, I don't want to live in those spaces.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to live in DMT land. I don't want to live in, psilocybin land. I want to go visit on a regular basis, and I want to have some friends there. Definitely. I want to have some spaces that I can go get a drink at. Right.
Right.
But I don't want to live there. I don't want to live with the insect beings and the fucking, mushroom gods, right? It's cool to go say what's up every once in a while. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about that medicine that I found for myself is it doesn't allow my addictive nature to really take over. Or it gives me an opportunity to see that addictive nature and be like, do you want to live here?
Yeah.
Do you want to live around like all the fractal arts and the space and the fairies and stuff? Maybe one day.
And it's the broader spectrum or broader perspective, which again, there's the idea of what we think we want, and then there's what we truly want, right? And in those spaces, for me, what I see is the immediate want, the quick fix. That's the sugar, the addictive thing that I do, right? For me right now, interestingly, I feel the least addicted to anything in my life right now. Okay. Which is funny because I have all my snacks right here. I always laugh about how I still have a drinking problem. I have my water and I have my decaffeinated latte, and then I have my veggie broth.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I've got all these drinks, and one might say what I'm actually addicted to, if you dig deep enough, is a sense of connection. Like, for me, consuming something gives me sensation with my body, with myself.
Yeah.
When I'm doing sugar, it's usually when I'm craving like a sweet connection, right? Something that's more intimate. When I eat things like meat and potatoes, I'm seeking grounding, right? So there's these ways that I can understand and relate to my relationship to food. Previously, for a long while right now, I know I've talked about this with you before, like my addiction to sugar was awful. And when I say sugar, I'm not talking about candy. Like, it was, dark chocolate and some non-dairy ice cream at night, or some banana bread to start the day, but then I would like want some chocolate in the middle of the day, and then maybe I'd have another pastry in the evening, right?
Right.
Not huge amounts, but what was disruptive about it was the obsession. So then, through different, honestly, like working with Hape and working through the sugar, which I didn't realize was going to be a direct connection when I did that, was like life-changing for me.
Yeah.
But then when I finally got through that, my greatest method and strategy is just living, right? It's embodying and really integrating the practices that I know work for me. And Michaela Boehm, she wrote A Wild Woman. I knew I was going to reference it and need to look it up, the title. A Wild Woman's Way. Okay. She's a sex and relationship counselor and coach. She's incredible. She was featured on Netflix. Anyway, I just have been going through her book, and I was doing the audio, and then I actually ordered the physical copy because I'm a tactile person. I love books, but also she has some really amazing exercises that I want to embody and share with my clients. She says the practice that works is the one that you do.
There you go.
And I was like, oh my God, I love that. And, you know, the program that I just created is called A Path to Freedom. It's not called The Path to Freedom.
Yeah.
And it's because what works for me may not work for somebody else. Mm-hmm. Right? And vice versa. And that goes back to, like, you know, what we were talking is like the methods and the strategies. Like, I genuinely believe that we were made for the path that we are all walking. Mm. And of course, in the moments when it feels like the shit's hit the fan and it's pouring down rain and somebody, you know, took my dog, like, of course, it's hard for me to recall that idea. And for me, that I go back to that, like, reaching out, asking for help, and knowing that I am worthy of receiving the support. And it's funny when you're talking about the voices in our heads. For a while, I was like begging my higher self to take on like a British accent. I was like, can you please just identify yourself? Right. Uh-huh. And I have people that ask me, like, how do I know what is my higher self? And it's easy for me to answer. It's difficult for me to implement.
Right.
For me, my higher self is always loving. Anything else that's less than loving is my ego. And my ego isn't bad or wrong. It wants to protect my body and my life.
Right.
And those are beautiful things when they work together. Mm-hmm. But, you know, going back to these phases that you're going through, like, that's my curiosity is like, what support system are you reaching out to? And are you still operating under this idea that you have to figure it out on your own? Mm. Like,
I'm fighting that a lot right now. Like, I'm fighting that a lot. There's, you know, even though, like we said, we have permissions, I've given permissions that don't need to be given, right? I mean, we don't need to give permissions, right? But sometimes we feel like we do, you know, or we need to be, you know, allowed the permission to cry, to emote, whatever. But it's still, as much as I know that it takes community and it takes more than me, like, it's still so hard for me to reach out and to get outside of that idea.
Yeah.
Right. If you can figure it out, right? Like, I even caught myself the other day, like, telling myself to stop crying. Mm. Like, just, you know, it was more like, you're okay. It's all right. You know, you don't need to cry. It's like, no, fucking cry, man. You know? But, you know, there's just so many different ways to approach it. And, you know, I think subconsciously I fell victim to the idea that, like you had mentioned earlier, there's not a way. You know, there's 8.5 billion people in this world, and that is going to give 8.5 billion different opportunities to grow in life, right? Maybe there's modicums of your journey that might land with me, but it's not Aiua's journey is going to work for Adam, right? And I think part of my own personal disgust with that I'm dealing with is that there's so much out there that says, either blatantly, like, hey, I am going to put this in my bio, in my titling, and whatever it is, that if you do what I do, you will be fucking happy. You will fight the devil, you will fight the demons, you will do all the things, and you will find the happiness that I have, because look at me. I've got commas in my bank account. I've got letters after my name. Right. I'm an alphabet army guy, right? You know, what the fuck, right? But then also, you know, like, you have these folks that, and this is, again, whether subconsciously or consciously, like, and I'll mention this because of this podcast, right? Because of this podcast, you know, I'm more of a public figure than I was before. I'm not saying that I'm popular or famous, but there's just, you know, more people that listen to me. And so because of that, I've gotten constantly people asking me, hey, you should put out, like, the top podcasts that you listen to, or the top books that have influenced you, or the top articles that you listen to, or the blah, 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 blah. Who the fuck am I? Right? Who the hell am I to say, hey, look at me. I figured out life. Look at the books that I've read because I figured out life, and this is how life has been figured out for me. And you should live life like me. So read these books and listen to this content and follow these people because this is how I've gotten happiness. I'm not happy all the time. I've got modicums of happiness, but still, it's like, you know, it's this idea that if you do what I've done, you will find my happiness. I don't want your happiness. Nothing against you, right? Your happiness is great for you.
Right.
And so, but that's one side of it, the creators or the people that put it out there. But I think on the other end of it, there is this idea that I just want the quick fix. I just want you to tell me what to do so I can figure this out. I don't want to try plant medicines. I don't want to try ketamine therapies. I don't want to try this. I want to know what the fuck is going to work.
Right.
That doesn't always work, right? And that's where the individualism really happens, right? Now we have opportunities. You can go butt-ass naked into a fucking field and prance around and do goddess photos and, you know, whatever you want and hoot and holler and do that shit. Good. That's awesome. That makes you feel like a human being. Do that. You can go sit fully clothed in tons of blankets in the dark, complete opposite of that, and find yourself there. You want to do that? Cool. Go do that, right? There's so many different ways to approach it now that... Not now, there always have been, but I feel like there's so many people that have at least come to see me in the work that I do that just want the answer. Just tell me what to do, and that's Band-Aid. Really not it, you know. And I think there's part of that with me too. It's like I just tell me the fucking answer. I meditate, I do yoga, I do plant medicines, I have cool conversations, I do work, like I cry, I try to do all the things, but I'm still fucking miserable. And upset with myself and not happy. But is that always? No. Right? Yeah. It's as much as, you know, I feel the goods, I'm feeling the perceived bads. So how can I build my support structure around me to embrace those times when I feel bad and to share the times when I'm feeling good? Yeah. Like when I'm feeling good, I don't want to just sit by myself and be like, oh, I feel good today. You know, I'm like, I'm going to go get some coffee and tell the barista how much this coffee amazes me, right? You did a great job with this cup of coffee today. Fucking fantastic. High five. That might sound cheesy as shit, but man, that makes me feel good, right? I want to share that happiness. Go help the bagger person over at Fred Meyer. Hey, you're doing a great job. Paper or plastic? Fucking both, man. You choose, right? Yeah. Let's have a good time today. You know, hey, you over there, help me choose extra strong or extra soft toilet paper. Don't ask any questions. Just tell me which one you choose, right? You know, it's like we want to share that stuff, but when we're not feeling good, we just want to be inside. We don't want to look for the people that have the extra joy. Like Brene Brown talks about. One of the things she does with her husband every morning is she wakes up and they have coffee and they say, hey, okay, I feel about 80% today. Cool. All right. Good, because I'm feeling 40%. Yeah. So I've got to make up an extra 20% to get us both to 100%, right? So somebody's got to step up a little bit. But you don't know that unless you communicate. I'm not feeling this today. Oh, guess what? I'm feeling this today. Cool. All right. So you're carrying it. Yeah. Right. Check in with me because I'm feeling like shit, but you're carrying the energy today. You know, so I think, you know, there's those opportunities to listen to your bodies like that, right? And respond in kind. Like, I feel like shit. I'm going to call Aiua today. Have a conversation, right? But that's not the first thing that pops into my head. I feel like shit. I don't want to get out of bed. I'm going to call into work. I'm going to call off my class, cancel my clients. But those are all the things that make me feel better. Right. You know? So. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important to, when we have those opportunities, waking up feeling like shit, to assess what is a loving choice. If I call off my day, am I going to use that time to perpetuate the darkness or to move through it and return to a lighter space? Right. Because I know, I mean, we're all human. There are days where we're like, fuck it. I'm going to get the ice cream and the chips and the popcorn and I'm just going to fucking...
You throw away the lid from the pint of ice cream. Like, this is a single serve. We're not putting this back on.
We're not putting this up. And then we watch garbage TV. We scroll. We compare, right? And there's those times where it's like she says, an existential kink. Like, we are getting off on what we are experiencing. Yeah. And, you know, scientifically speaking, when we do that, we are deepening those connections in our brain to keep going in that direction. Yesterday we went on a hike. We left the hike. My son and I were super hungry. We're talking about where to go. And I'm like, I really would like something other than a burger. I've been eating a lot of burgers. We go to the restaurant. I order a burger. Why did I order a burger? Well, because I've been eating a lot of burgers. So now my brain and my body are like, we need meat and bread and veggie, right? And I'm like, oh, this
who
is
ordered this?
like, what is it? The saying, likes alike, or some.
Yeah, something like that. Like, yeah.
So it's like, if I continue to do these things, this is what I'm going to get, right? I had a short conversation before coming in today with an old client who's struggling with experiencing rage. And I'm like, rage is valuable. And she said, wow, that is the first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah.
And it's like, these feelings are bringing us really important information. Jim Carrey said, if you break down the word depressed, it's deep rest.
Yes.
And I love that. Until I've been resting so much that I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm atrophied. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So rest until you find that breath that says, get the fuck up.
Right.
Move, go, do. Right? Mm-hmm. We are human beings, but without doing, we are stuck.
Yeah.
And
right.
so, and doing doesn't mean like, I don't have to be able-bodied to do. Mm-hmm. But there's this balance. And I think we know where that turning point is if we have enough presence to feel it.
Right.
And so I love that you recognize that you're not reaching out when it may be time for you to reach out. And so that was going to be my next question is, what are you not doing that you know you need to be doing?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it is the community, reaching out, like being a part of community.
Receiving.
Yeah, I haven't received in a long time.
Yeah.
Like I have actually this weekend coming up. I have a lighter weekend, so I've been looking at sound baths, and I think I actually have a Reiki appointment tomorrow with somebody. But yeah, like the receiving side for me is it's really hard for me to prioritize that, and to know. I do know that it's important, and I know that it's almost like a responsibility that I got to keep for myself, because like I feel like if I'm not doing my own work, then I can't hold space for people doing theirs.
Absolutely.
And so
gotta smoke what you're selling.
Yeah, right. So get high on your own supply, right? But so yeah, I know there's, but I think that's also part of the work. Is finding those opportunities where you can hear yourself dismissing the thing that you know is going to work. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, just call your brother, call your mom. I can't call my mom anymore, but call friend.
Yes, you can.
I can. Yeah, you can. And that's. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, because I do feel like I'm still very, very close to my parents, both passed, and I can call on them. And there's a rational side of me that's like, no, you can't. But there's the mystical side of me that's like, no, my mom and my dad, the picture of them is on my altar, and then I see them every single day, multiple times a day when I sit down. I can hear my mom, I can smell my mom, I can feel her like, tug on my beard chins, hairs, so, I know that it's there, but I think part of it too is recognizing when you're dismissing it. Because before it could be a thing that you don't even realize is a thing. So it's not even a card you turn over. It's not even a door you open, right? It's just it's completely out of your zeitgeist. But once you know it's a thing, and you still turn away from it, it lands differently.
Oh yeah.
Like if you know in your heart of hearts that eating a burger for you is gonna make you die and clog your arteries, then you still choose to eat that burger, man, it's going to do that thing. But if you don't really know and you're just hungry and you eat a burger, I think it lands differently. Like when you know that you're doing something toxic to yourself and you still choose to do it.
Or if you believe that what you're doing is toxic,
right.
even if it's not.
Even if it's not, exactly.
But that's another rabbit hole. I watched this video with Muji. I used it for one of my healing circles recently. Just Google Muji wanting.
Okay.
He has this lovely thing where he says, say you want this microphone. You really want this microphone. You see that I have this microphone, but you really want it. And you begin to suffer because you don't have the microphone. You think the microphone's going to give you happiness. I'm kind of emanating his very cute. I love Muji.
Yeah, he's great.
One of my favorites. He says, then finally you get the microphone and you think, oh, yes, I have the microphone. You feel so happy. You feel so fulfilled. And I think he quotes Ramana Maharshi.
Mm-hmm.
He says the thing that he said is, we confuse the microphone with the happiness when actually what we're feeling is a relief of our suffering.
Wow.
And that has changed my
Wow.
my whole perspective on wanting. And so when I hear you talking about this phase that you're moving through, I think it would be worthwhile to look at like, what do you think that you're wanting? Right. And then there's my other lessons around wanting is, for me, when I'm wanting, it's because I'm believing I'm lacking. Right. And that was really pivotal for me when I learned that, like, I don't know, about 6 years ago. But this addition to what Muji shares was like, oh, it's the wanting that is creating my suffering. And it's the receiving that is not providing me with the joy and the happiness that I think I'm getting. It's the relief of the wanting. And so if I stop wanting, right? So he goes on to talk about, so the woman who's asking the question, he says, so what's the problem? And she goes, I'm just really confused. And he says, well, what do you want? She goes, I don't want anything. And he said, then there's no problem. So then he tells a story about this other person that he worked with that would wake up and come out into this space every day and explain about his problem. And so then he said, and I'm basically explaining the whole video, but watch it anyway because he's great. He says, so one morning he comes out and I come out and he said, okay, so what's the problem? And he goes, I don't know. I'm just so lost. I'm struggling. He goes, why? And he goes, there's no problem.
God, that's, yep.
So if we decide to side with the voice in our head that reminds us that there's no problem, I am at peace, there's nothing wrong. And that isn't to say that there aren't things in the world that are happening that aren't aligned with love and peace and unity. But what I know is that and Ram Dass's is too, it's in one of the East Forest songs that came on the other day after a client and I were collaborating in our bitchiness. I don't always help my clients work through it. This was a different kind of client. And so we were commiserating over our shenanigans. And the song came on and he says, if you want to live in a world that's happy, then be happy. But if you're mad about living in a world that's mad, do you see what that does? And so then he says, your job is to become completely, utterly at peace. And once you've done that, then go ahead and be mad.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So,
That's,
yeah.
It's kind of like, that's a beautiful way to round it out. Like it's self-serving, it's self-sustaining prophecies, right? If you see the world as being like, fake and rough and, angry and all, then it's going to be reflected back to you, and if you look at it with, unintentional or maybe, unhinged rose-colored glasses, then maybe everything does look a little fake, right? But, finding that balance for you and finding that, the way, the perspective that you're able to see. And then I think, this is where the constant practice is, the self-serve practice, the self practice. Is you got to know what your voices sound like. You got to know what you're good, you're manipulative, you're all that stuff, so you can have that honest feedback for yourself when you're faced with those things in the world that might be questioning to you. You know? So, man, yeah, that's It's funny because like I've been wanting to have a conversation like this for a long time, and I've had little modicums of conversations over the past couple, maybe month or so, about some of these frustrations that I've been feeling. And again, like I'll end this by saying like I know these are my frustrations. I'm not projecting this on anybody. And if you found what I was saying offensive, I'm so sorry. Please reach out, because I'm just trying to like if the problem with the brain is that the brain thinks it can solve its own problems. Right. And that's where
My
I've been
sick
at.
thinking, fix my own sick thinking.
Totally. Right. So being able to talk about this and to express in a safe environment, safe because I know you and I know that you would hold that space. And from the feedback I've gotten from the listeners, this is the type of content like we need to be vulnerable. So, I think that, it's finding those safe spaces that we can explore maybe some of those stories that are permeating our brains that might make sense until you say them out loud. And you're like, whoa, that didn't fucking, that's not the way that's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
Clearly I don't have my thoughts right, or, I got some more thinking to do, maybe I can use some external influence on my thought process so I can get out of my confirmation bias,
Well, and for me, there's this deep dive. If I have these thoughts, can I look at where they came from? Why I have them? That's where my peace comes from. That's where my compassion, my self-compassion comes from. If I have a judgment that's either external or internal, it's because there's something that influenced me to think that way at some point in my life because it helped me survive.
That's true. Yeah.
And when I go back to that place and I recognize, oh, honey, like, what an interesting idea that you created at that time in your life. And that's not real. Then I can come to this modern moment and be like, yeah, of course I felt weird about that person that totally changed their identity. And I knew no understanding of why it was happening. And it threatened the way that I don't do that for myself. And there's all these ways that I can reflect in that moment. It's the compassion for me that, like you say that you're not projecting and that this doesn't have to be anybody's story. Know that it is almost everyone's story.
Right.
Like, projection or not, what I've learned after working with hundreds, if not thousands of people over the last many of years is that the details are different. The feelings and the thoughts, they are almost the same. The feelings for sure. Right. Yeah. My emotional body is identical to everybody else's emotional body. Where it shows up in my body may be different, but we all know what these feelings are. And yeah, the mind, oh my God, it's magical and mystical and really monstrous at times. But it's like, what is that movie where the wild things are? Like, can we make friends with the monster? And appreciate it. Holy fuck. Like, that monster is badass. Like,
yeah,
I survived some really wild things because I fully believed in that monster. I know that there was a lot of things that probably could have or would have happened to me if I didn't fully believe in that persona at those times in my life. And so, yeah, for me today, I'm very grounded. I've been spending a lot of time in nature, a lot of time off social media.
Yeah, important.
Doing things that really nurture me. And so it's easy for me to say that today. But I know my time will come and I'll question those things and I'll worry and wonder what the fuck am I doing, and I'll have my turn. But I do find those times becoming less and less, and I'm grateful. So
yeah, well, thank you for that. It's that pendulum swing of humanity.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for holding space for me again. I appreciate all that you do, and I'll always leave notes in the show notes for ways to get a hold of Aiua. She's a beautiful practitioner in many different modalities. So yeah, if you need anything from either of us, please reach out. But thank you, Aiua. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And see you next time. Thank you so much for spending time with Aiua and myself. Please check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Aiua or myself, ways you can support the show, all that fun stuff. So Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.